My name is Michelle S. I am a recovered compulsive eater. So I feel like I've probably always been a compulsive eater. I feel like I was maybe born that way. When I was young, when I was a baby, um, apparently I would cry a lot and my mom would feed me and that would shut me up. It worked. And my aunts used to always say that I was the fattest baby they'd ever seen. I hate it when they bring that up, but apparently, food worked. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other things I tried. But mainly, food has been my only addiction, and it's the one that stuck with me. In part because I do have, and I will talk about my family a little bit, but it's not to bag on them or criticize them. It's just to share a part of my story. I have um, learned to love my family that I wasn't able to before. And it really was me that was the problem, not them. I always thought it was them, but before program. I've come to learn that I was a big part of that problem with my family. So I do have a fair amount of alcoholics and drug addicts in my family. And with food, I didn't really think I had a problem. I could always feel kind of superior to them because I wasn't passed out in the street or having any of those issues. So, of course, I didn't have a problem. I'm also quite tall and used to be taller. I think I grew maybe an inch between 13 and 14. So at 14, I was pretty much 6 feet tall. So I was always really a thin kid. And because I was thin, that was another reason that I thought I never had a problem with food. And and that's kind of one of the things about this illness that I've learned is you can't just tell by looking at somebody if they have a compulsive eating problem or not. Some people could be bulimic and throwing up and be quite thin. And other people might be overweight and just have bad habits. So you can't tell by looking at someone if they have a compulsive eating problem or not. But as a kid, I did notice I was different than other kids. I thought way more about food and different types of food and things than other kids did. Other kids didn't seem to save up their allowance and ride their bikes to buy candy at the store like I did. Um, Growing up, when we camped a lot as a family. It's one of the things that my family really taught me was to enjoy the outdoors. But for me, camping was a lot about the food that we were going to have. S'mores around the campfire, all those kinds of things. And I associated a lot of events and things growing up in my life with food. And I also struggled with body image issues at a really young age. I think I was in fifth or sixth grade. And they lined us up in the hallway and they weighed all of us. Now, because I was so much taller than my classmates, I of course weighed more. And I thought weight equaled being heavy. And so I went home from school that day and I told my mom that I was overweight, that I was fat because I weighed more than a lot of the kids in my class. And both my parents struggled with their weight. And I think so. My mom, instead of, I really wish she would have been able to say to me, you're not fat, you're not overweight. Let me help you make some healthy choices. But instead, she just bought me whatever I wanted for my diet as a kid. Well, as a kid in the 70s, that was like sugar-free candy and Tab. That was my diet. And, you know, I look back on that and I think it's kind of crazy that my mother did that. But um, I think she thought if I figured out this food thing at a young age, I wouldn't struggle like they did. And I think that's why they did that. Neither of my parents had problems with drugs or alcohol. It seemed to skip a generation. Um, but I did grow up in a house that emotions were a struggle, and my parents really struggled with how to teach us coping skills, how to teach us how to handle emotions. And my parents were both born in the 1930s. And so you didn't, they didn't have any kind of a skill set to pass on to me, you know. They were at a time when kids were seen and not heard, and they certainly weren't taught those skills. So they didn't have it to pass on to us, me and my brothers. Um, so as kids, we kind of had to find our own coping mechanisms. And it wasn't the healthiest coping mechanisms. I found food and I found solace in food. My parents, like I said, struggled with their emotions. So at my house, growing up, my dad was a really jovial, fun guy until he wasn't. And we never kind of really knew what was going to set him off. So I learned to kind of walk on eggshells. I was kind of looking for those mines, so to speak, that you couldn't see because I certainly didn't want to step on one because when he blew, it wasn't good. My mom, on the other hand, tended to expect us kids to meet her emotional needs and also to know what they were. And of course we didn't, and we didn't meet them. So she was sort of passive aggressive with her anger. So my mom was kind of like a sniper from the side. And I grew up not feeling very secure in my home or my environment. And I felt that if I could just make everybody happy and keep everybody calm and be that people pleaser and just kind of make sure everybody was happy, because if everybody was happy, then bad stuff wasn't going to go down in my house. Um, and so I became really hypersensitive to people's energies, people's emotions. And that, of course, followed me along all my life. And I had a lot of fears about, if people were upset or angry with me. I kind of felt that meant that I was a bad person, or, um, there was something wrong with me. And I also was given the message a lot of time growing up, particularly with anger: you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't feel this way, you shouldn't feel that way. So I grew up thinking a lot of my emotions were abnormal and I didn't know how to handle them, so I would eat. And as I mentioned, I tried different things. And I didn't really struggle with my weight till after college. But even during college, because I had body image issues at a young age, even though I was very thin, I thought I was overweight. Um, I was still trying to lose weight. And I remember at one point, I was pretty young at this time, I think I was a freshman in high school. I had a goal weight because I was 6 feet tall, and all the models on television and all the tall people on television were like 6 feet tall and they weighed 120 pounds. And so that's what I thought I should weigh. That was an ideal weight. And I remember I got my wisdom teeth removed and I had been dieting pretty heavily. So I had a few more pounds to lose before I reached my goal weight of 120 pounds. And because I had my wisdom teeth removed and I was on a liquid diet, I remember that I actually got down to that 120 pounds and I was really excited for like 5 minutes. And I remember thinking like right away, well, I wonder if 120 pounds is good enough. Maybe 150. I can see where I could lose some more weight here. Maybe 115 pounds would be better. So no matter how much weight I lost, I never felt good enough. And none of the things that I thought would happen in my life happened. Like those lies that I told myself was that I would be popular. People would like me. I would have a boyfriend. I would have a great job. My life would be wonderful. I would go and do all those things that I was putting off because I didn't like my body. And I look back on pictures now of when I was younger and when I was a kid, and I was like, oh, you have such kinder eyes when you look back. I was like, gosh, I looked great. I don't know what I was thinking. But because I never felt good enough, no matter how thin I was, I never felt good enough. And I didn't stay at that weight very long. It wasn't a sustainable weight for me. I tend to have a larger body frame. I'm much more big boned and I don't have a small frame. So I couldn't sustain that weight and I started to gain weight. And that's kind of when that yo-yo dieting started. Um, I would go in high school, I hung around with, it was really popular at the time to have a lot of people I went to high school with had eating disorders. Most of them outgrew them after they left high school. I didn't. Um, we would joke around at class reunions, like in high school, how we all had eating disorders. We would starve ourselves for days and just drink like herbal tea and lemon water. And then, of course, I would binge eat after that because I'd be so hungry. And of course, my blood sugar was off and, I'd gain everything back that I lost. I tried all sorts of weird things to lose weight. I remember one time I was eating like all carrots, pretty much all carrots, because carrots are pretty healthy and they're low in calorie. But I ate so many carrots that the inside of the palms of my hands turned like an orange yellowish color. And I also would eat foods that I didn't think I should be eating over the sink and I'd chew them up and I'd spit them out because I thought, well, then I get some of the taste, but not all the calories. Um, I tried all different kinds of things too. Like in college, I would drink coffee all day and smoke cigarettes and not eat. Um, I would buy, and that I started this at a young age, buying different types of cookbooks or self-help books, things that I thought would help me lose weight. I probably could have filled a small library with all the different types of recipe books and all the things that I thought were going to fix me because it wasn't until I came to program that I really understood what my problem was. I thought I had a food problem, I thought I had a willpower or self-control problem. So for many, many years, I tried solving the food problem with retreats, exercise plans. In my 30s, after my first divorce, and I did try drugs and alcohol, but I didn't like that feeling of being out of control. With food, you can give that sort of false sense of security that you're in control. You're really not in control, but because you're not drunk or stoned, you feel like you're more in control. Um, but I would do acupuncture, I would do meditation, I did hypnosis. I would eat I ate baby food for a while. I tried the baby food diet where because baby food's fairly healthy and it's in very small portions. Um, but your body craves food for a reason and you need to eat to function. That's just how it works. Um, but what I would do more so than other people, and it wasn't till I was in my adult years that I realized how different I was from other people. So other people might compulsively eat around the holidays, right? They might overeat because the food is so good and you're trying all different things and they would eat and then they would be like, gross, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. It was kind of like me if I'd have 2 glasses of wine, I would just be like, gross, I don't want to do this anymore. But for me, my body was different. I could always eat and overeat way more than other people. And I can remember, and it's been a long time, but I still remember that how I would tell myself, I'm just going to have one more piece of this. Usually it was like I would pick up a piece on the way home, thinking I would have food for the dinner for the rest of the week, and I'd eat a couple pieces, and then I'd eat a couple more, and then I'd tell myself, oh, I'm just going to have one more piece. And you know what? I'll just have a half a piece or a quarter of a piece. And it wouldn't matter if I put the food away. It wasn't like it was out of sight, out of mind. I just could not stop, and I would continually eat way more than I intended. And I would go get my groceries for the week, and I would I'd buy lots of healthy foods, and I'd also buy lots of snack or treat foods, and I would eat all those up first, and then just have the healthy food and be like, yeah. But honestly, the sicker that I got, if healthy food wasn't available, I certainly binged on big cake sheet pans of baked broccoli, or raspberry puree. I would eat when I wasn't hungry because it was what I was self-medicating with. It was what I gave myself as a sense of ease and comfort rather than being able just to sit with whatever I was feeling. I knew it was too big for me to handle. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't have healthy relationships with men in my marriages. I had very unhealthy relationships because you kind of attract what you put out. So if you're not mentally healthy, you're not attracting mentally healthy people around you. So I didn't have people around me who could help me out. I did have people around me who told me I had a problem with food. Um, I can remember my stepkids would hide their Halloween candy and their Christmas candy and all that kind of stuff from me, or tell me not, please don't eat it. And I never intended to, I just intended to go have a few pieces of their candy. And I would eat way more of their candy. My ex would hide, one of my exes would hide his food that he didn't want me to get in his truck. And, that of course didn't work because I could ferret out stuff. Right. I learned to do that pretty easily. So eventually he would just buy things that I just physically would not eat that I didn't like. I don't like jalapeno flavored things. So he would buy jalapeno flavored potato chips because he knew I wouldn't eat them. Um, there was also the fact that, when I was compulsively eating, I really didn't want to be a part of life around me. What I wanted was to come home from work and compulsively eat and watch TV, which was easy to do when I was single because there's nobody to tell me, hey, we could use your help, or don't you want to be part of the family? So, one of the things that I forgot that I was going to talk about that I did use to manage my weight was in my early 30s, after I got divorced from my first husband, I stopped smoking and I started running. I started exercising compulsively. And because I was young, as long as I exercised compulsively, I could eat whatever I wanted, and I was really thin. Um, and I thought, now I have it all figured out. I can eat whatever I want and I can be thin. But I didn't have a healthy state of mind. I was still restless, irritable, and discontented. I still was miserable. I was miserable at work. I was miserable if things didn't go the way I thought that they should go. So my life existed where if things were going good, I was happy. If things were going not well or not the way I thought they should go, I was pretty miserable. I didn't understand that was what life is, that people could have peace and sanity even when things weren't going their way. I didn't think that's how life worked. Life was supposed to work to satisfy me. And because I was a nice person, a giving person, somebody who helped people out, somebody who volunteered a lot, I never thought I was a selfish person. I couldn't see my selfishness. I didn't see that my behavior affected my stepchildren to the point where they were actually concerned for my safety. Um, I struggle to be fully present as it is. But when you add, my eating disorder on top of it, I really wasn't present. In the time that I was married to my second husband, in those 9 years, I totaled two vehicles in accidents. And I remember after the second time that it happened, one of my stepkids said to me, we had a dog named Tippy at the time, and he said, Michelle, Tippy is afraid that one day you're not going to come home. And I realized that, how my eating disorder was affecting him because it was his way of telling me he was afraid I wasn't going to come home because I was going to die in a car accident or something. Um, there was another time, same stepson drove me to the chiropractor because my back was so messed up. And I know my chiropractor quite well because she was my neighbor and he came in with me. And she was like, "What's going on?" And he just started unloading to the chiropractor about how I don't take care of myself. I eat M&Ms for dinner. And we got out to the car and I'm like, "What was that? Why were you ratting me out to the chiropractor?" And he's like, "Well, because I don't want you to die." And I'm like, "Dusty, I'm not going to die." Um, but he really was afraid, and I think that's one of the fallacies that we tell ourselves as compulsive eaters that, oh, I'm just hurting myself. The money that I spend, the different clothes that I buy, the food that I guard with my life. Don't touch my food. I'm just affecting myself. I'm not affecting anybody else. I'm not like an alcoholic. I'm not like a drug addict. I'm not spending, that kind of money. I'm not blowing the rent money, but my illness affected people. People were concerned for my safety. Family members were concerned for my safety. And for my weight as I got heavier, because eventually what happens is you don't want to compulsively exercise. So when I was single, it was fine to spend, hours at the gym. It was fine for me to when I would visit my family for Christmas. I live in a cold part of the country. I would come home for Christmas and I had special clothes that I bought at the store designed for me to run in 20 degrees below zero because I thought that was a good idea to go outside, run a 5 mile course that I had looped out from high school, that not tell anybody where I was going, just I'm going for a run. And this route took me on country roads and down. It's still called Beer Can Alley, but it was where we partied as teenagers. And it was basically a dirt deserted road that was like a shortcut. And nobody went down that road. So had I fallen on the ice and broken my leg, I laid there and froze to death because I didn't tell anybody where I was going. And, I could have easily been hurt, but I was addicted to physical exercise at that time as much as I was addicted to my compulsive eating. And so I did all kinds of unhealthy things, running at night, running in snowstorms, just doing all kinds of weird stuff. And that was fine when I was single, but when I got married the second time and wanted to do more than just come home and work out for hours, um, plus, your body gets tired of that. It was fine in my 30s, but in my 40s, my body was starting to hurt. And I started to gain weight because I was still compulsively eating. I wasn't chronically addicted to the exercise because once I realized I needed to stop, I did, and it wasn't a problem for me. Um, but with food, I could never make that decision to stop. I always compulsively ate when I didn't want to, because my mind told me it was a good idea, even though I knew it wasn't, even though I had tried hundreds and hundreds of times to stop compulsively eating and to look for that magic combination of diet and exercise that was going to fix me, that was going to be my thing, that was going to work for me. I never found it. And the reason being is because I thought I had a food problem and I didn't. I had a hopeless state of mind and body. And so that respect, I was no different than an alcoholic or any other addict. Um, I got divorced from my second husband, um, and things were pretty low in my life at that point, but I still wasn't um, defeated enough. Okay. I still didn't really think that I had a problem that I couldn't control because I could be successful if I just put my mind to it because I did it in other areas of my life. And what finally happened was because of the way that I was living my life, the constant stress that I was putting my body under by my thought process and the crappy eating habits for years, is I had a bunch of physical symptoms. I could no longer sleep at night. It was like adrenaline was surging through my body. I could maybe sleep a couple hours at night. Um, and I had a host of other symptoms. And turns out I had uh, adrenal fatigue. And, my traditional doctor didn't really believe me. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to find a naturopath that would work with me. And when she tested my adrenal function at 51 years old, I had the adrenal function of a 95-year-old woman. And I felt like crap. So it was right about that point when I started seeing her that I started to get even really crazier on how I was going to fix this thing. And I hate sharing the story, but I'm gonna, because it shows my thought process and the desperation I needed to go to get to the point where I was defeated enough to come to program. And I was listening to a podcast of mine that I used to listen to. It was one of my favorite ones. And it was like, I forget what it was called, but they did all kinds of paranormal stuff, and the host also hosted Darkness Radio, and they're talking to this woman who was selling magic candles. All you had to do was burn these magic candles and they'd solve your problem. And I thought, this is perfect. Buy these candles and they're going to solve my problem. And so I bought these candles, and there were a lot of red flags that this woman was maybe not legit, but I didn't know what ability she had, so I didn't want to piss her off. So I ended up just buying the candles and burning them. And of course, they didn't work. And you leave them burn while you're gone. I almost burned my house down because one of the candles cracked. And fortunately, it burnt out. But what happened was this woman told me, so I say the magic candles didn't work, but ultimately they did, because this woman told me, she basically told me that these candles wouldn't work because, of course, she wouldn't give me my money back, but she told me the candles wouldn't work because I was a chronic compulsive eater and I had to address that issue. And that was the first time that resonated with me. And of course, I went to look on some states that are compulsive eaters and all that. And I ended up on a different fellowship that I was a member of for. It's the same group that I'm with now at 51. And I was defeated enough at that point to be like, okay, just tell me what to do, and I will do it. Didn't ask any questions, didn't ask, how does this work? I was concerned about having to follow a food plan because I knew I couldn't do it. But my sponsor didn't talk about food plans. And I thought, okay, and so I just did whatever my sponsor told me to do because I was desperate enough and I had nowhere else to go and nothing else to do or try. Nothing else worked. I didn't think that this would work, to be very honest. But I had prayed that God give me some kind of help and relief, and this is what showed up. So I just tried to trust it. And my sponsor at the time, she had peace. She wasn't binging. She wasn't compulsively eating. And I thought, gosh, what would that be like to not be obsessed with food 24/7, to not revolve my whole day around food, to kind of be a normal person? I was baffled. I didn't understand what that would look like, but I thought that sounded pretty cool. So I decided to give it a try, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was pretty sick at the time that I came. I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't think straight. So I didn't have the ability to fight or to ask a lot of questions. Like, how does this work? Tell me how it works. What do you mean? I didn't do any of that. I just started working the steps. And the first three steps seemed pretty easy. The first step, and I always tell people this, it's the only step you have to be 100% in, because had I thought that there was something else out there for me, like therapy. I tried therapy. Therapy got me to a great place to be willing to look at myself and forgive my family, and it taught me why I compulsively ate, but couldn't stop. I still compulsively ate, even though I knew why I did it. Um, but what I came to understand was that I had a hopeless state of mind and body, and I was just using food as a sense of ease and comfort when I couldn't handle anything, when there was any feelings I didn't want to deal with. So the first three steps are pretty easy. The fourth step was more challenging than I thought it would be because I had to look at me instead of pointing my fingers at other people, because that's what I like to do. I like to point my fingers at everybody else and say they're the problem. If they would just act this way, if they would not irritate me, my first husband was an alcoholic. Well, as soon as I got divorced from him, of course my problems were solved because I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have any problems. I wasn't able to see my role in anything. Um, so step four was an eye opener for me, and it was the first time that I had looked at my role in things, and my role in my family. I thought my family was crazy and so much worse than everybody else's family, and if I just had a loving family. And my one of the things that my sponsor has helped me realize is that God could have given me the perfect family, and I still probably would have been a compulsive eater because my problem was simply how I think. And um, I would get all, for example, at work, everything that went wrong, everything that people said to me that I didn't like, I'd get these things sort of, it was like a resentment playlist in my head. And I'd come home and I'd play this playlist over and over in my head and think about I should have said this, I should have done this, blah, 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 blah. And it just would really rev me up. And then I just eat and binge. Um, because I was stewing on this stuff. I was very resentful, and I didn't see um, how resentment was really deadly for me. Some people have the ability to stew in resentment and not go off the rails. Some people have the ability to gossip and not go off the rails. I don't. It's just not a luxury I have. And when I have gossip to friends or when I have whined and complained, that's another thing that I was really big at, was whining and complaining. Like, oh, let me tell you about my day. It was so awful. Um, since I've come to program, I've had to make amends when I do that behavior with my friends, and they're like, it's no big deal. It's just what friends do. We just listen to that stuff. And I'm like, no, but you don't understand it. I don't have that luxury. You guys have that luxury, but I don't have the luxury to do stuff like that because it sends me into a tailspin. Um, please go lay down. My dog is being kind of a butthead. But anyway, um, so I worked step four and step five with my sponsor, and it was really eye-opening. My my sort of spiritual experience or spiritual awakening was a little bit slower. So I've sponsored people who like they sort of get this lightning bolt out of the sky, and they just sort of get it. That wasn't me. I had the educational variety where I had to like make a lot of mistakes and just sort of learn the hard way by having to clean up my messes. And like I said, I made a lot of mistakes, but it was a constant process. And I wasn't thrilled about step 8 and 9, the making amends, because I didn't like to admit I was wrong. And it's still something that I have to be cautious of, and I still work on today. I'm much better than I used to be. Even my supervisor will tell me, and she never used to say stuff like this. She used to be my coworker, now she's my supervisor, but so I've known her a long time. She never used to say this to me, but she said, I like it because you just admit when you're wrong and you apologize for it. And we just move on and you fix it. And she's like, other people here I have to fight with. And that's something that I had to learn because I wasn't good at that. I didn't like to admit that I was wrong. And I definitely didn't like making amends to people who I felt wronged me way more than I wronged them. I felt like, where's my amends from these people? And my sponsor really helped me see that it's not about getting what I want. That's not going to make me healthy and sober and have a sober state of mind. When I have a sober state of mind, I don't compulsively eat. So I'll talk about the time that I had to make an amends that I didn't want to make, that almost got me kicked out of program because I didn't want to make it. And I had, at this time, I had not spoken to my youngest brother in about 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. And I had been in program. So we had kind of a falling out when I came to program. And my sponsor had said, you can call him or, send him a note, tell him you want to talk if he's willing, that she helped me put together a little, I know you're angry. I know you have some things you want to talk about. Let me know when you're ready. But he was living in another part of the United States. And so I hadn't seen him in like 2.5 years. And we were all going to meet at my niece's house. It was over a Labor Day weekend. And my sponsor said, well, you get to make an amends to him. And I was like, but you don't understand, blah, 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 kind of balking at the process. And she made it very clear, either you will make an amends to him or you will not be in program. And that set me back on my heels because um, if I don't have program, I don't have a sober state of mind and I'm a mess. So that really got my attention. And I mean, she was so mad at me. I remember she was like so mad at me, and she helped me because I was being a selfish brat, and she helped me put the amends together. And I when I saw him in person, I made the amends, and it went well, as most of the amends I have made go well. And I'm grateful that I made that amends because it was the last time I saw my brother. I talked to him about 8 or 9 months later. We had been texting and we had talked, and I remember telling him, if he needed anything to let me know, I'd come out and help. Because he was a raging alcoholic and not doing well. And he said, no, no, I don't want you to come out. And I said, okay, but call me if you need anything. And I love you. And that's the last thing I got to say to him because he died. And it really helped me to be able to grieve his loss and to be of help to my mom and my brother who had not made amends to him and had a very hard time and still has a very hard time dealing with his death. So there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of, because sometimes you don't get another chance when they're gone. So I am grateful for a program for that reason and for that opportunity. Other ways that it has changed my life and made my life better is I can see times where I was selfish, and I still have to keep on top of the selfishness because I'm still thinking about myself first and foremost. Even today, we had at work, I was talking to my boss, and I haven't camped in a really long time. And I think I need to go back to that. And I said, if I come in on a Friday afternoon, can I just bring my dog in for a couple hours and then we'll head out? And she's like, no, because Barb across the hall is deathly allergic. And I'm like, yeah, but Kevin used to bring, she goes, but Barb hated it. The old me would have thought, well, I'm still bringing my freaking dog in. I don't care. It's just going to be a couple of hours. But I thought about it and I thought, why would I make someone miserable, for my own convenience? And it's just I didn't think of things like that before. I thought about what was going to be most convenient and what I wanted. And that's the biggest thing in my thinking. And that selfish thinking is what, got me the wristband to the, Chronic Compulsive Eaters Club. And if I didn't have the 12-step program, I would very quickly go back to being that selfish person that I can tell you that my coworkers didn't enjoy being around. I used to think I was the fun person at work, and they didn't really see me as fun. Um, sure, at times I could be fun, but also at times I could be, screaming at people or not wanting to work or being lazy or my relationships too with my friends have changed because I don't, dump all my crap on my friends and, expect people to solve my problems. Probably the biggest change has been in my relationships with my family. I don't see myself as superior to them like I used to. I'm able to, it's definitely been a work in progress. I've been in program over 8 years, and it's always been a work in progress for me, and I'm able to kind of peel that onion and grow a little bit each year in program, and that's um, been really beneficial to me and to those around me. And yeah, I'm just grateful to be recovered and to have this program and to have a more meaningful life. I have a much more meaningful, sane life, regardless of what's kind of going on in my life. And I do have a passage that I wanted to share that this resonated with me a lot when I first came to program. And it's on page 42 in the big book. It's the last paragraph. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying, and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it, even if I could. Um, and it took me a while to see that, and it took me a while to see the changes in myself. Other people, I think, saw it before I did, but it's so much of a better way of life to not think about food constantly. And again, my name is Michelle. I live in Central Time. My number is 715-580-0641. You can call or text anytime. I have WhatsApp. I'm happy to help. We're going to move into the Q&A and commenting section of this meeting.
Hey, it's Kat. I can kick us off. I have a comment and then a question. So the comment is just thank you so much. The part of your story where you were talking about how we're different and we can't afford, the same things that other people can. I think it's so important because, there's always this fine line between like, okay, I'm human, I have to be able to express myself, but we take things to extremes, and I can't tell you how many times I've had friends be like, "What are you talking about? Like, I'm here to listen," and it's just so hard because it seems like so harmless in the moment and like but it's just
Mhm.
like we're like a limitless load. Like it starts harmless, but there's not that stopping point. And so that's the thing, because like a lot of times it seems like, oh yeah, I mean, this is what family's for. Everyone talks about their feelings. Am I supposed to talk about nothing? But it's that inability to stop that really gets us. But yeah, the question I had is kind of unrelated, but you were talking about that situation today at your workplace. I was wondering if you could kind of talk through like practically, like what do you do? Like you had a character defect come up. Like what did you do differently that you wouldn't have been able to do in the past without these tools? Like what helped you to move forward so you weren't stuck anymore in that?
Right. So in that type of situation, I didn't need to send a 10th step to that one because I wasn't irritated by it or anything. It was just a moment of realizing, hey, you're being selfish. Don't bring your dog into work if people are allergic that are near you. Kind of common sense things that somebody who's not inherently selfish might get right away, but not me. But so yeah, it First of all, I was so used to when I first came to program stuffing my emotions. And so I didn't even realize it was very hard for me. Fortunately, my sponsor was patient with me about my 10 steps because I wasn't aware of my emotions. So when I would say it's no big deal or I don't need to send a 10th step on that, I probably needed to, but I couldn't see it because I wasn't aware even. Everything that I was doing was so stuffed down and unconscious that it just took continual practice and continual practice of being miserable. It wasn't like when I first came to program, everything was rosy sunshine, or it is like it is now, where I'm not as stressed or whatever. It took a lot of work and a lot of practice and a lot of practicing the steps. And then the biggest thing for me, not just the 10 steps, but more so the getting out to help someone else. And I can't tell you how many times that I've been angry at someone for something or angry about something at work or pissed off about something, and then I go and help someone else. Um, I forget what I was angry about. Like I can't remember why I was angry. And the other thing that I had to do, and you know, the quieter you are, the more you work these steps, the more you practice these principles, the more you're going to see. It didn't come right away. You know, it's taken a long, some people are quicker than I am. It took me a long, long time, but I can see things now that I couldn't see before. And to help me with the unconscious, with my feelings, my stuffing my feelings, this was just allow myself to sit with those feelings and just say, you know, I'm going to sit with these. I'm going to feel this, no matter how uncomfortable or icky it feels. And then it just tends to move through more quickly. And so those insights, it takes a time to learn if it's your ego speaking or an insight from your higher power. The reason you know is one tends to go really well and the other one tends to not go very well. And that's how I learned to kind of tell the difference. The one question on there that I think is really good too is like, what role does your sponsor play in recovery? I think that's a really good one. And I'll say briefly is that um, my sponsor typically at this point is, and I don't really text my 10 steps. It's more of I call because I need to be, I probably need a talking to about my attitude. And I need, my sponsor really helps me see where I'm wrong when I can't always see that. You know, for sure. But my sponsor has always been fairly strict and fairly tough with me, which is exactly what I need because if I had somebody who allowed me a softer, gentler way, I probably wouldn't be here. Probably would have left. But anybody else wanna share on anything really?
It's Kat. I can just kind of close this out, I guess, with
Good.
my sponsor sometimes to me is as weird as it might sound, is more of like a placeholder. And it's because it's not about who she is. Like I agree with you that my sponsor's never who I want her to be. She's always who I need her to be. Even though I can't see that a lot of times when I'm calling or sending those tents. But for me, it's all about the process. Like when I have something coming up, spiritually in my life, no matter what aspect it is. Usually there's something up with my process. And so, I used to think the whole point of calling my sponsor was that they were going to say some magical thing and it was going to change my perspective and then was going to go on my merry way. And I found that 9 times out of 10, she's saying the same stuff. And I keep waiting for something new to come up. Like, she's going to say something like exciting or different, but it's always the same stuff. And after a while, I'm like, oh, I don't really need this, but I do. I do need it because it stops me. She's kind of like my stop sign where like when I'm going throughout my day, I'm doing what I think is best or what I want to do. Like that, like forced communication and like reaching out, doing tents, calling her. It's not about what she's saying. It's slowing me down from doing like self-will run ride as the book talks about. So for me, it's all about the process, and it forces me into a different way of living. And that different way of living changes how I'm thinking. Because when I'm go, 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 like there's nothing good going on in my head. So, but yeah, I'll pass with that.
Great. Thank you.